Hello, my name is Scarlett. I am a student of English. I want to tell you about my journey, how I learned to remember words. At first, it was very hard. I would forget new words again and again. But something changed. And now, I remember words easily. Let me tell you how. Words were flying out of my memory like birds from a cage until I found simple tricks that made them stay. When I first started learning English, I was so excited. I thought it would be easy, like learning a song or watching a show. But soon, I found myself forgetting words. I would learn 5 words today, and by tomorrow, I could only remember 1 or 2. I felt disappointed. I worked hard, but my brain just didn't keep the words. Sometimes I stared at the page in my notebook thinking, I saw this word before. Why can't I remember it now? It made me feel small. Like maybe I was not smart enough to learn English, but I didn't give. Up one day in class, my English teacher, Ms. Turner, gave us 5 new words. She wrote them on the board: tree, mountain, bird, sky, and river. She said, "These are your new words today. Try to remember them." I wrote them down in my notebook and read them many times. I even said them out loud. But by the time I got home that evening, I could only remember tree and sky. I felt upset again. I sat at my desk, looked at my notebook, and sighed. Why can't I remember them? I asked myself. I didn't understand what I was doing wrong. That night, I told my mom, I'm learning so many new words, but they don't stay in my head. My mom smiled and said, Your brain likes stories, Scarlett. Try to make the words into a story or a picture in your mind. That's how you used to learn things when you were little. I didn't really understand what she meant, but I thought about it all night. The next day, I went back to school and told Ms. Turner about my problem. She looked at me kindly and said, Scarlett, your brain is like a movie theater. It remembers pictures better than plain words. Try this. When you learn a word, close your eyes and imagine it. Make it into a little scene. That was the first time someone explained it to me that way. A scene? Like in a movie? That sounded fun. Ms. Turner walked to the board again and wrote a word. Apple. She said, Scarlett, now close your eyes. Can you see a big red apple? It's shiny. Maybe there's a bite taken out of it. Maybe it's sitting on your kitchen table. Can you see it now? I smiled. Yes, I said. I can see it clearly. Good, she said. Now that word is yours. That small moment changed everything for me. I went home that day with a different feeling. I opened my notebook and looked at the words again. Tree, mountain, bird, sky, river. I closed my eyes and tried something new. I pictured a big green tree standing next to a tall mountain. A colorful bird was flying in the blue sky, and below, a river was flowing gently. Suddenly, all 5 words were in one picture. I didn't feel confused anymore. I felt calm and even happy. I began to do this with every word I learned. But I didn't stop with just thinking about pictures. I began to draw them. At first, my drawings were very simple. If I learned the word rain, I drew clouds and little lines coming down from them. If I learned the word cat, I drew a small kitten with whiskers. The pictures helped me. Even if I didn't remember the full meaning, the drawing made me feel something. I could remember where I was when I drew it, what I was thinking, and that helped bring back the word. Soon, drawing became part of my routine. Every night, after finishing homework, I sat with my little notebook and a pencil. I wrote the new words I learned that day and made tiny drawings next to them. I also started adding color. I used blue for water words, green for nature words, red for action words, and so on. I didn't know it then, but I was training my brain to remember through connections. The colors, the shapes, the lines, they all made the words stick. One day, while waiting for the bus, my friend Zoe asked me, "Scarlett, how do you remember so many words so fast?" I smiled and showed her my notebook. She flipped through the pages and said, "Wow, this looks like a comic book." That gave me another idea. Why not make my learning feel like a storybook? I started turning each group of words into a mini-scene. If I learned school, pencil, desk, board, and clock, I drew a classroom with all those items. I even drew a tiny version of myself sitting at the desk. It was fun. I wasn't just learning, I was playing. The words became part of stories, part of life. They were not just letters anymore. They were people, places, and feelings. After a few weeks, I began to test myself. I closed the notebook and tried to remember the words just by thinking of the pictures I had drawn. And guess what? It worked. I could remember the word river just by seeing the little squiggly line of water I drew. I could recall the word laugh when I thought of a funny face I had drawn for it. I was finally getting it. The words were not running away anymore. There was one day that I'll never forget. It was a Friday, and Ms. Turner gave us a surprise quiz. We had to write the meanings of 10 English words we had learned that week. I got all 10 correct. Not just that, I even added an example sentence for each one. Ms. Turner came to my desk and said, "Scarlett, I'm proud of you. You've improved so much." That made my heart feel warm. But the truth is, it wasn't just practice. It was the pictures. The small scenes I created made each word special. I remember one afternoon, I was learning the word storm. I could have just written, storm means heavy rain with thunder and lightning. But instead, I closed my eyes and made a movie in my mind. I saw myself standing by the window, watching the wind blow the trees. I heard thunder. I saw lightning flash across the sky. I imagined the sound of rain hitting the glass. That whole scene helped me feel the word. Not just know it, but feel it. That's why I never forgot it. From then on, I treated every word like it had a life. When I learned the word friend, I thought of Zoe. I saw her laugh. I saw us eating ice cream together. When I learned cold, I pictured a snowy morning, wearing gloves and drinking hot cocoa. My memory became stronger, and my heart stayed involved. I wasn't just using my brain. I was using my heart and my eyes. Even at school, things became easier. I no longer felt lost when I opened my English book. I started to enjoy it. It was like solving puzzles. Every word was a new piece, and the ya say, ya picture helped me find where it fit. Some of my classmates noticed that I carried a lot of colored pencils and a thick notebook everywhere. One boy even said, "Scarlett, you're always drawing. Are you trying to be an artist or learn English?" I just laughed and said, "Both," because for me, drawing was part of learning now. Then something surprising happened. Ms. Turner invited me to show my notebook to the whole class. "Scarlett has a special way of learning words," she said. "Maybe it will help you too." I walked to the front and showed them how I used pictures, colors, and small scenes to remember words. Everyone clapped, and I saw a few kids smile like they just discovered something new. After that day, I saw many of my classmates starting to use pictures too. It made me feel proud, not just because I helped them, but because I had found my own way to learn, a way that worked for me. Drawing pictures became more than just a study trick. It became my secret key to understanding English. When I looked at a word, I no longer felt scared or confused. I felt curious. I asked myself, what picture can I make for this? That question opened the door to learning, and this one little trick, this simple act of drawing and imagining, led me to something even more powerful, something I didn't know I needed. One evening, I was sitting at my desk, coloring a drawing of a park for the word picnic, when I noticed how full my notebook was getting. Each page had so much color, life, and feeling. Each word had its own home, its own picture. I smiled at how far I had come. But as I flipped through the pages, I had a new thought. These pictures are helping me a lot, I said to myself. But what if I make these pictures even more personal? What if I write small sentences or stories with these words? Would that help me remember even more? And with that thought, I slowly turned to a fresh page, held my pencil in hand, and got ready to do something new. I looked at the fresh, empty page in front of me. My colored pencils sat in a little jar, neatly lined up like soldiers ready for their job. My favorite one, a sky blue pencil, was in my hand. I tapped it softly on the table, thinking. The pictures I had drawn in my notebook were helping me so much. I could now remember words better than ever before. But suddenly, I wanted something more. I didn't want just pictures anymore. I wanted something that felt like mine. Something that felt like a small world made by me, for me. A place where every word had a home. Where every page told a little story about me and my learning. That's when the idea came clearly into my mind. I'm going to make my own word notebook, I whispered to myself. Not just a notebook full of copied class notes or vocabulary lists from the teacher. No, this one would be different. It would be my world, my secret garden of English words, a place where I could be free to write, draw, color, and even make little stories. However, I liked. No rules, just me, my ideas, and the words I wanted to remember forever. The next morning, I went to the bookstore near my school. I told my mom, I don't want just any notebook, I want a special one that feels like it belongs to me. My mom smiled and said, pick the one that speaks to you. I walked around the shop slowly, looking at every shelf. Then I saw it. A soft purple notebook with stars on the cover and thick, creamy pages. I picked it up, opened it, and touched the paper. It felt strong, not like the thin paper in my school notebook. I imagined writing my words in it, drawing my pictures, coloring little ideas, and writing mini stories in the corners. I hugged it close and told my mom, this is the one. When I got home that day, I wrote my name inside the cover in big round letters, Scarlett's Word World. Underneath, I added a little sentence, a place where words become friends. It made me smile. It made the notebook feel like more than just paper. It was like meeting a friend who would walk beside me on my journey to learn English. I decided that every page would be special, not just filled with facts or meanings, but filled with feelings. If I learned a word, I didn't want to write just its meaning. I wanted to write where I heard it, how it made me feel, what picture it gave me, maybe even what the weather was like that day or what song I was listening to when I learned it. For example, one day I heard the word hope in a movie. The character said, "There's always hope, even in the darkest times." That line made my heart beat faster. I didn't just learn the word, I felt it. That night, I wrote it in my notebook. I drew a small candle burning in a dark room. Then I wrote, I heard this word while watching a sad movie, but it made me feel warm inside. I also wrote a short sentence. Hope is the light we carry in our hearts. That word never left me after that. Soon the notebook started growing, like a small tree with new branches every day. Each word was a leaf, and each page was full of colors, drawings, and short notes. I began to group the words by feeling, words that made me smile, like laughter, joy, sunshine, went together. Words that felt calm, like ocean, peace, soft, sat beside each other. Even sad words like lonely, cry, lost, had their own page. but I always added a little light to those pages, like a flower or a bright star. I made rules for my notebook, but they were not boring or hard rules. They were fun rules, like no black ink, only colors. Each word must have a picture, even a small one. Every page should make me feel something. No erasing. Mistakes are part of the story, and that last rule was the most important. Sometimes I spelled a word wrong, or my drawing looked funny. But I left it just as it was, because it showed my journey, my honest effort. Over time, writing in my word notebook became the best part of my day. I waited for quiet moments, after dinner or just before bed, to sit with it. It was like my safe place, a place where I didn't worry about tests or grammar or long, hard rules. I just played with words. I made them dance and laugh and even cry. It was my own English playground. At school, I began to see a difference. When the teacher asked a question, I could answer more easily. When I had to write an essay, I had more words to choose from. And when I spoke, I felt more confident. It was like the words I had drawn, colored, and written had become part of me. I didn't just know them, I owned them. One day, we had a spelling game in class. Ms. Turner called out words, and we had to spell them correctly on the board. When she said butterfly, I ran up smiling. I wrote it quickly without thinking. Later, a classmate asked, "How did you spell it so fast?" I smiled and said, "Because I drew it last week in my notebook. It had yellow wings and flew over a garden. I remember everything." That's when I realized something. My notebook wasn't just helping me remember words. It was making me live them. Some weekends, I sat with my best friend Zoe, and we worked on her notebook too. I told her, "You don't have to copy mine. Make it your own. Choose your favorite colors. Make silly pictures if you want." We laughed as she drew a cat with glasses to remember the word smart. We made word games, little riddles, and jokes with the new words. It was the most fun I'd ever had learning anything. One rainy Saturday, I sat by the window, watching the raindrops fall. I had just learned the word cozy, and I wanted to add it to my notebook. I drew myself with a blanket, a warm drink, and a book. I wrote, "Cozy means warm, soft, and safe, like this moment right now." That small entry meant so much to me, because every time I saw that word later, I felt that rainy afternoon all over again. Then came a new idea. What if I used the words I learned in small stories, like one-page tales that included my new words? That way, I could remember the words not just through pictures, but through action, through adventure. So I tried it. One evening, I had just learned the words forest, echo, whisper, explore, and brave. I wrote a short story about a girl who walks into a dark forest. She hears whispers in the trees, and her own voice echoes through the woods. She is scared, but keeps going because she wants to explore. She becomes brave. I drew the trees, the moon, the girl with a flashlight. I used all 5 words, and suddenly, I never forgot them again. Each time I wrote a new story, I added more emotion, more detail. Some stories were funny, some were scary. Some were about friendship, dreams, or even my future. I realized something big. I was not just learning English, I was becoming a storyteller, and my words were my tools. Months passed, and my notebook became thicker. The pages curled at the edges from so much use. Some had smudges, small tears, or pencil marks. But I loved it all. Every mark told a story. Every page was like a little window into my journey. Then one day, something wonderful happened. At school, Ms. Turner announced that our class would have a small English showcase. "You can bring anything," she said. "A project, a poster, a song, a poem, anything that shows your love for English." I knew right away what I wanted to bring. I held my notebook in my arms like a treasure chest. I decorated the cover with stickers, stars, and even a tiny ribbon. On the day of the showcase, I stood in front of the class and said, "This is my word notebook. It's full of words I love, pictures I drew, and small stories I wrote. Each page helped me learn, and each page helped me grow." I showed them my pages. I read one of my mini-stories. I showed a drawing of the word kindness, a little girl sharing her umbrella with a cat in the rain. When I looked up, I saw smiles, real smiles. Ms. Turner clapped. "Scarlett," she said, "you've made something beautiful. You found your own way to learn, and now you've shared it with others." That night at home, I sat with my notebook again. I turned the pages slowly. I touched each picture, each sentence, each memory. I thought about how I had started, so unsure, so lost, forgetting words again and again. And now, I was strong. I was learning, feeling, creating. My notebook wasn't just a tool. It was my friend. It didn't judge me. It didn't rush me. It simply opened its pages and let me be myself. And it was in those quiet moments, sitting by the window with my notebook and my colored pencils, that I realized something even bigger. Learning English wasn't just about remembering words. It was about discovering who I was through those words. And now, with each new word I added to my notebook, I felt one step closer to becoming the person I dreamed of being. That night, after the English showcase at school, something inside me felt different. I sat on my bed holding my purple word notebook, flipping through the pages slowly. Each word, each picture, and each tiny story made me feel proud. I smiled at the silly drawing of a flying pizza next to the word delicious. I laughed at my drawing of a sleepy cat to help me remember the word lazy. My notebook had become a part of me, a soft and quiet friend who always listened, but as I sat there in the calm of my room, I felt a little tug in my heart. "I know these words," I whispered. "I really do, but—" I stopped talking. I closed my eyes and thought harder. I knew what the problem was. I had written all these words. I had drawn them. I had made tiny stories in colorful pages, but I hadn't used them with my voice. Not really. I hadn't spoken them out loud much. Maybe sometimes in class. Maybe once or twice with Zoe. But most of the time, I kept the words inside my notebook or in my mind. And suddenly, I wanted more than that. I wanted to say the words, to hear them with my own ears, to feel them coming from my mouth like real, living things, not just ideas on paper. That night, I tried something new. I opened a fresh page in my notebook and chose 5 words I liked: brave, sparkle, friendly, whisper, and cloud. I looked at each one carefully, remembering when I had first written it down, the little drawings I had made beside it. Then, one by one, I read each word out loud. At first, my voice was small. "Brave," I said. "Sparkle. Friendly." I looked around my room. Nobody was there, just me and the quiet. But still, my face turned a little pink. I felt shy, like someone was watching me. "Whisper," I said even softer. And then I laughed. I had just whispered the word whisper. That made me giggle. The last word was cloud. I said it slowly, stretching out the sound. Clued. I felt the word float out of my mouth like a soft pillow in the sky. That night, I decided to make a new habit. Every day I would read some of my words out loud. I would say them clearly, not fast. I would hear them. I would taste them with my tongue. I would let them roll off my lips. I made a little rule for myself. 5 words a day, say them out loud, then use each one in a small sentence. The next morning, while brushing my hair, I looked in the mirror and said, "Today, I am brave. I will speak English even if I make mistakes." That was my first sentence. When I got to school, I whispered to myself, "The sun makes everything sparkle today." That was number 2. At lunch, I saw Zoe sharing her cookies with a new student. I smiled and said quietly, "Zoe is so friendly." Number 3. While walking in the hallway, I noticed 2 boys talking very softly. "They're speaking in a whisper," I said in a low voice. And when I looked out the classroom window, I said, "That cloud looks like a bunny." 5 words, 5 small sentences, all mine, spoken, real. That day felt magical, and from then on, I did the same thing every day. Sometimes I spoke the words in the morning, sometimes in the evening. Sometimes I stood in front of the mirror and talked to myself. Other times I walked around my room acting like I was in a movie. One weekend, I even pretended I was on a cooking show. I picked words like slice, stir, tasty, plate, and meal. I went to the kitchen, picked up a spoon, and said, "Now I will. Slice the tomato. Then I will stir the soup. This will be a very tasty meal. Look at the plate. It looks so pretty." I laughed the whole time. It was silly, but I didn't care. I was speaking English. I was playing with it. Later, I told Zoe about my new habit. "I talk to myself," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "Like really talk?" I nodded. "Yes, I speak my notebook words out loud and make tiny sentences." She smiled. "That sounds fun. Can I try?" And so we began to practice together. Sometimes we picked a theme, like animals or feelings. We would sit in the park with our notebooks, pick 5 words each, and then take turns saying them out loud and making small sentences. "Tiger," Zoe said. "The tiger is strong." "Excited," I said. "I am excited to be here with you." We laughed when one of us made a silly sentence like, "The giraffe danced in the rain," or "I feel tired when I eat too much ice cream." But every time we spoke, we felt a little braver, a little stronger. One day, Ms. Turner gave us a small project. We had to write 5 new words we had learned and make a sentence with each one. I grinned when I heard the assignment. "This is going to be easy," I whispered to myself. I chose my favorite 5 words from that week and wrote them down: glow, gentle, excited, brave, and dream. Then I made my sentences. Not too long, just simple and true. The moon has a soft glow. My cat is gentle when she sits on my lap. I feel excited to learn new words. I try to be brave when I speak English. I had a nice dream last night. When I read them out loud in class, I didn't feel nervous. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake, because I had already spoken those words so many times at home, with Zoe, and to myself. They felt like part of my own language now. Soon I started talking more in class. Just a little at first, answering yes or no, saying small things like, "I think so," or "I like this." But slowly, my sentences grew longer. I started using the words from my notebook when talking with friends. And guess what? Nobody laughed. In fact, some of my classmates asked, "Where did you learn that word?" I told them, "I say it every day. I speak it out loud." One afternoon, something funny happened. I was helping Zoe pick a word for her sentence, and we couldn't decide between quiet and silent. She said, "What's the difference?" I thought for a moment. Then I said, "Quiet is when there's little sound. Silent is when there's no sound at all." She nodded. "That makes sense. You explained that really well." I blinked in surprise. Me? Explaining words to someone else? That was new, and it felt amazing. After that, I started making little games for myself. I would pick a room in the house and name 5 things in it using my English words. In the kitchen, bowl, spoon, fridge, toast, and apple. I would say each, one out loud and make a sentence. "This bowl is full of soup." I use a spoon to eat. The fridge is cold. I made toast this morning. This apple is red and sweet. Sometimes I used a timer and made it a challenge. Say 5 sentences before the time runs out. It was fun. It made me move fast, think fast, and speak. Other times, I would go outside and do the same thing. In the park, I would whisper, "The bird is singing. The grass is soft. I see a butterfly. This bench is hard. The sky is blue." Wherever I went, my words went with me. My voice became my tool. It wasn't always perfect. Sometimes I forgot how to say a word. Sometimes I said it wrong. Sometimes I laughed at myself, but I kept going because now I knew the secret. Writing words helps you remember them. Speaking words helps you own them. They become yours when you speak them. They become real. They don't live just in books anymore. They live in your life, in your mouth, in your heart. That's how I started speaking English, not in big speeches or long conversations, not with perfect grammar, not with fancy words, but with small sentences, one word, one sentence, one day at a time, and slowly, all those little sentences started building something bigger, something amazing, something that was waiting just ahead in the next part of my journey. It was a quiet Sunday morning. I sat on the carpet in my room, the sunlight falling through the window like soft golden paint. My purple notebook rested in front of me, open to the newest page. I had just finished saying my 5 words out loud and making sentences for each. My voice still lingered in the room. The words felt strong in my mouth. Gentle, stretch, window, garden, breathe. But then something new happened. As I looked at the 5 small sentences I had written, they started to feel like they wanted to grow. I know that sounds strange, but it's true. The sentences looked like tiny seeds, and I could almost see them trying to turn into something more. A picture came into my mind. A girl sitting near a window looking at a garden, taking a deep breath. I imagined her name was Lily. She was quiet, gentle, and always thinking. I thought, what if she stood up, walked into the garden, and saw something amazing? And just like that, a story was born. I turned the page in my notebook and wrote at the top, "Lily and the Garden of Words." I smiled. Then I started writing. Lily sat by the window. The morning sun touched her face. She took a deep breath and smiled. Her garden was quiet and green. She saw the flowers stretch toward the sky. She felt gentle wind on her face. Today felt special. Today, something new would happen. I stopped and read it again. That was it. That was the adventure I didn't know I was waiting for. The sentences I had made earlier had turned into something magical, a tiny story. A story that helped me remember every word I had learned, but also gave me a new way to feel them. And somehow, writing the story made the words stick in my mind like glue. That night, I showed Zoe what I had done. "I made a story," I said, opening my notebook, "with my new words." She read it slowly and smiled wide. "Scarlett, this is beautiful. It feels like a little dream." That made my heart warm. Zoe said, "Can we write one together?" So we tried. We picked 5 words together: candle, storm, brave, dark, and hope. Then we sat on the floor and whispered ideas back and forth. "Let's make the main person a little boy who's not afraid of the dark," Zoe said. I nodded. "And he lights a candle when the storm comes." We scribbled and laughed and crossed things out. And finally we wrote. The storm was loud. The sky was dark. But Leo was not afraid. He was brave. He walked to the kitchen and found a candle. He lit it and held it up high. I believe in hope, he said, and the storm slowly began to quiet down. We both stared at the story when it was finished. It wasn't very long, but it felt like a movie. We could see it. We could feel it. And, best of all, we remembered every word. From that day on, I started making more stories with my words. Every week, I picked a new group of 5 or 6 words from my notebook. I would look at them, say them out loud, and then close my eyes. What kind of world do these words belong in? I would ask myself. Sometimes the stories were soft and sweet, like Lily and her garden. Sometimes they were exciting, like Leo and his candle in the storm. Sometimes they were silly, like a dancing raccoon who wore sunglasses and loved bananas. One of my favorite stories was called The Secret Bus Ride. It came from these words: ticket, quiet, stranger, map, and whisper. Nina held her ticket tight in her hand. She sat at the back of the bus. It was very quiet. A stranger sat beside her, reading a map. Then the stranger leaned closer and said in a whisper, "We're not going where you think we are." When I read it to Zoe, she gasped. That's like the beginning of a real book. We giggled like 2 kids with a secret, but deep down, I knew something was changing inside me. The more I wrote these tiny adventures, the more I felt like English wasn't just a subject anymore. It wasn't just grammar rules or vocabulary tests. It was a tool, a key. And with that key, I could open doors into places I had never imagined. My words became my passport. They took me to deserts and oceans, to space and underwater cities, to small towns and busy streets. Each story helped me remember the words better. Not because I was trying to memorize them, but because I had lived with them in my mind. I even started making my own little book. I called it My Word Adventures. It was just a notebook with a blue cover. On each page, I wrote the group of words I had used at the top, and then below I wrote a short story using all of them. I added drawings too, nothing fancy, just little pictures to make it fun. One page had a rocket ship flying through clouds next to the words fast, space, zoom, loud, and sky. Another page showed a shy girl holding a microphone with the words stage, nervous, speech, smile, and clap. Sometimes I would read my stories out loud to my mom. She always smiled and said, "Scarlett, your words sound like magic." And I guess they were. Even my teacher, Ms. Turner, started to notice. One day, she asked us to write a short paragraph using 5 new vocabulary words. I used the ones I had already written a story for. When she read mine, she looked up and said, "Scarlett, your writing is full of feeling. It shows you understand every word deeply." "How do you do it?" I just smiled and said, "I make stories." Ms. Turner nodded. "That's a powerful way to learn. Keep doing it." Her words made me feel proud, like a little light had turned on inside me. Soon I started helping some of my classmates too. Pick 5 words, I would say, and let's make a mini adventure together. They thought it was fun. We made stories about pirates, robots, birthdays, ice cream shops, snowstorms, and treasure hunts. One boy named Marcus, who didn't like writing at all, made a story about a robot who lost his shoes. We laughed so hard while reading it, but Marcus said, "Hey, I actually remember these words now." That's when I knew. Stories are like boats. Each word is a piece of the boat, and when you put them together, they can take you anywhere. You don't just remember the words. You sail with them. And the more I sailed, the braver I felt. There were still times I made mistakes. Sometimes I forgot a word or used it wrong. But I didn't stop, because every mistake was just part of a new adventure. Sometimes my stories were just a few lines long. Sometimes they filled the whole page. Sometimes they made me laugh. Sometimes they made me feel like crying. But every story made me learn, and every word became a part of me. The afternoon sun poured through the window as I closed my notebook. I had just finished another tiny story for my Word Adventures book, a short tale about a girl named Sophie who lived in a treehouse with a talking cat. It was silly and sweet, and it used all 6 of the new words I had learned that week. As I leaned back against the wall, feeling proud and peaceful, something surprising happened. I wasn't tired of learning English anymore. I used to feel drained after studying. All those lists, drills, and rules made my brain feel like it was carrying a heavy bag. But now something was different. I didn't feel like I had studied at all. I felt like I had played, like I had made something that was fun and mine. The stories, the drawings, the little adventures, they were exciting. They were alive. And for the first time in a long time, I wanted more. Just then, my phone buzzed. A message from Zoe popped. "Up. Want to do something fun today? Bring your word notebook." I smiled. I quickly grabbed my notebook, a few pens, and a banana for a snack, then ran down the stairs. My mom waved from the kitchen. "Going to Zoe's?" "Yep, learn something." "Fun," she said with a wink. "I will." When I got to Zoe's house, she was waiting for me in the backyard with a box in her hands. Her eyes were shining with excitement. "I made a game," she said. "A game?" "Yep. It's called word cards. Want to try it?" Of course I said. Yes. We sat on the grass, and she opened the box. Inside were little square cards made from old cereal boxes. Each card had a different English word written on it in colorful markers. Some had tiny pictures, too. Zoe explained the rules. We take turns picking 5 cards. Then we have to make up a story using those words. The other person gives points for creativity, correct use, and funniness. "That's genius," I said, impressed. "I got bored last night and made it. Let's play." She handed me the first 5 cards: train, whisper, pancake, jungle, and cloud. We both laughed. "Okay," I said, "give me a second." Then I started. One morning, a pancake decided to travel the world. It hopped on a train that took it deep into the jungle. There, it met a parrot who could whisper secrets. Together, they built a house on a floating cloud. Zoe burst out laughing. 10 points for making a pancake the hero. We played for an hour, then 2. And before I knew it, the sky turned pink, and the birds began their soft evening songs. That game changed everything. Suddenly, English was not just something I had to do, it became something I wanted to do, and not just through stories, but through games. That night, I made my own version of the word cards at home. I cut pieces of cardboard and wrote new words from my notebook on each one. I used colored pencils and little doodles, just like Zoe had done. But I also added something new, some wild cards. The wild cards had ideas like, make a poem, use your words in a song, act out the sentence, draw the word instead of saying it. The next day at school, I showed them to Zoe. She gasped. "Scarlett, these are amazing." We started playing during break time, and soon other kids joined. Even Marcus, the boy who once hated vocabulary, begged to go next. The best part? We were laughing, running, clapping, drawing, and shouting out words, and learning the whole time. That week, our teacher, Ms. Turner, noticed something. "Scarlett," she said after class, "I saw your group playing with those cards. That's one of the most creative language games I've ever seen. Did you make them?" I nodded. "They make learning so fun," I said. "It doesn't feel like studying at all." "That's the best kind of learning," she smiled. "Keep going." Her words meant everything to me. From that day forward, games became a big part of my English journey. Sometimes Zoe and I would play a game called Word Detective. We would hide word cards around her house and race to find them. Once we found a card, we had to use the word in a sentence to collect it. Whoever had the most sentences at the end won. Another time, we made a game called Word Charades. One person acted out the word silently, and the other had to guess, and then use it in a sentence. It was hilarious. When Zoe acted out explode, she jumped in the air and fell to the floor, sending her socks flying. I laughed so hard I almost couldn't breathe, but I remembered the word forever. We even made a board game with words. Each square had a challenge. Some said, "Spell this word backwards." Others said, "Tell a story using this word." And some said, "Draw a picture of the word." Every challenge made us think, laugh, and remember. My favorite was when we created the word adventure map. We took a big piece of paper and drew a path from Word Land to Fluent Mountain. Along the way, there were lakes, forests, castles, and caves. Each stop had a challenge. To move forward, you had to complete the word mission, like finding synonyms, making rhymes, or telling a silly story with new vocabulary. We played it every Saturday. I even taught my little cousin Ella how to play, and she loved it too, even though she was younger. One day, my mom sat beside me and said, "Scarlett, your English is really growing." "I think so too," I said, "but I'm not just learning now. I'm having fun." She smiled. "That's the best way to grow. When it feels like play, your brain opens up." And she was right. The more I played, the more I learned. Without even realizing it, I was using words I had only seen once or twice. I was hearing them in songs and recognizing them in books. I was remembering them, because each word now had a memory attached to it. A funny game, a wild story, a happy afternoon. Even when I was alone, I started playing little games in my mind. I would walk through the house, look at objects, and name them in English: refrigerator, spoon, blanket, window. Then I'd give myself mini challenges. Use blanket in a scary sentence. The blanket moved, but no one was under it. Use spoon in a happy sentence. She found a spoon made of chocolate and smiled all day. It was like my own private game show. Sometimes I'd even challenge my mom. "I give you 3 words: snow, button, and laugh. Make a story." She loved it. These games became my world. They made English my friend, not a task. I never thought studying could feel this exciting. But when words became part of games, they turned into treasure. Every word I found, I kept like a little gem. Every story I told, I placed like a star in my sky. Every laugh I shared with Zoe and my classmates, I held in my heart. And all of this, every bit of it, started because I wanted to remember words. I never expected that remembering words could feel like building castles and flying dragons and baking banana pancakes with space parrots, but it did, and I was ready for more.